Hey everyone, this is Paul, and you are listening to season 2, episode 4 of the Generation Latino podcast. I want to thank you for tuning in. I want to thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. It truly, again, I say this all the time, but it really does mean the world to me that you are tuning in. I hope that you're having a great day. I really hope that whatever you're doing, whether it's morning, afternoon, evening, in your car, driving, at home, I hope that everything is just going well and I am sending positive vibes your way. So, these last couple of weeks, I've really been kind of just thinking a lot about my future and what I want to do in these next phases in my life. What do the next 5, 10, 15 years look like? Knowing that I'm only getting older and that we're all getting older. But I wanted to ask you if you have ever lost that inner spark in you, if you've lost confidence as you've gotten older, if you have questioned maybe some choices that you've made in the past. And as I was kind of thinking about all this, I think that oftentimes we forget who we are. We forget the root of who we are, what drives us, helps us move forward. And today's episode, I really want to talk about remembering who you are and what that looks like. Because I think sometimes with setbacks and failures, we kind of forget and we lose sight of what really matters, what drives us, what our dreams are, and what our goals are. So today's episode is going to be remembering who we are. Hope you enjoy. All right, so remembering who we are, what does that even mean? I'll go back to my 16, 17, 18-year old self. And I remember being that age and being fearless. There was nothing that scared me, that bothered me. I traveled a lot alone. I went out of state. I was in California, New York, Florida. I mean, I would travel a lot on my own and I was fearless. I truly was fearless and nothing was really an obstacle for me. I just did things. I just did things. And I remember being an undergrad and just, it wasn't even a thought in my mind of what does failure look like. It wasn't there. And I think oftentimes a lot of us, when we were younger, when I say younger, I mean 25 and younger. And I think oftentimes we operated life so fearlessly that we didn't even care what happened, the outcome or anything. And I say that because when I was 25, 24, 23, I had this tenacity. And I think a lot of you listening too had this fearless ability of just taking on the world and not letting it phase you. So I would say probably maybe 2 years ago, I had to really talk to myself and tell myself, remember who you are. The Lion King is one of my favorite movies. I remember when they tell Simba, remember who you are. When Mufasa tells him, remember who you are. I think oftentimes with life, we forget who we are and the downfalls of what life can bring us, loss of loved ones, divorces, friendships ending, just life in general. That can really affect who we are, and it's affected me, and I remember having to have a conversation with myself because I was kind of, like, in the dumps. I was a little nervous about, going back to school in my 30s and, like, what that looked like, and am I too old? Am I too this? Am I too that? And I'm like, "Paul, what do you snap the fuck out of it. Why are you allowing all of this insecurity to creep up when when you were 25, shit, even, 26, 27, you didn't give a fuck. You signed up and you did, right? Like you didn't give a shit. You weren't afraid. You were fearless, but somewhere along the line, I lost all that. And as we get older, I think we have to really work on being who we are and who we want to be. And I say this because I know there's people out there listening where they're in a space where they've forgotten who they are, forgotten what makes them happy, what drives them, what makes them move forward. I see some people sometimes and they're in a slump, right? They're in this kind of dark area in life, whether they've been through a breakup or a heartache or, they've just kind of lost all their confidence, which it happens. We're human. We're living life. We're living in this world. So because of that, we're going to experience things. I tell people, don't forget who you are. You are that fearless bitch. Like, you are that person who is driven, who is educated, who is unapologetic. Oh, but it's so hard to remember that sometimes, especially when you've grown up and your parents don't even have that, right? And I say this a lot, but when you lived with parents who didn't want to take up space, who didn't really want to bother anyone, you're like, well, I don't want to ruffle any feathers. I don't want to shake anything up. But being Latino, a lot of us out there were taught that. And I've talked about this many times in other episodes, but I know for me, I saw a lot of other things. I saw a lot of things in pop culture in the world, visionary artists and creators. And I was like, okay, that's what I want to be. So I've kind of altered my life in that, in fearless women, in women that took up space unapologetically. So when I say remember who you are, I mean that. If you're out there listening and you feel defeated or you feel like you can't take up any space, yes, you can. And I know during that dark time for me, a couple years ago, defeated, really unsure and unaware, I really had to dig deep and surround myself with things that helped me remember who I was. So I created this playlist of music that helped me just kind of get back in the groove of things. I remember one time I was talking to my cousin and I was telling her, like, listen to music that makes you remember a time when you were that person that you were proud of. What was it? Was it being at the gym? Was it surrounding yourself with better people? You can always get back to that version of yourself. And I think sometimes we think that we can't. Oh, those were the glory days. Those were the days I was young then. No, 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 no. You can be in your 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s and be that version of yourself. I think oftentimes we allow self doubt to creep up and really take over. So you're like, I don't think I'm worthy of looking nice, dressing well, feeling good about myself. So let me just wallow in this kind of self pity. But remembering who you are will help you get out of that. And I know for me, I've had to really dig deep, remember who I was, remember that kid that was traveling by themselves, traveling to California, going to New York and going to, places on their own and with a backpack in hand and being on the Greyhound. Remember that because I had to tell myself that. I had to give myself that pep talk to help me to be like, "Oh, I don't wanna be in the classroom." Like, I'm 30 years old and I'm in the fuck that. Like, I'm like, "No, I'm in this classroom because I wanna do better. I'm in this space because I wanna do better." But if you're listening out there, remember who you are. I'm gonna steal the quote. again from Mufasa because that was such a significant part in the movie. He was lost, right? Simba was completely lost. He felt worthless. He felt defeated. He blamed himself for his father's death. Oftentimes, like we blame ourselves for things that happen in our lives, but that doesn't mean you forget who you are, right? So that movie is actually like my favorite movie of all time, that and Titanic. But I just, there have been times when I've had to really lock in and remember who I am. You're fearless, you're gutsy, you're smart. Tell yourself that so that you can make it happen. Because to be honest, if I would have stayed in that, I'm not worthy, I don't think I got it in me anymore, I'm not that fearless person, I'm shy now. I will say this, being in my 30s, I have to give myself a lot more pep talks. I have to redirect myself a lot more because confidence doesn't come as easy to me as it used to come to me. I think we just have to dig deep to find it. I think everyone is born with confidence. I do. I really believe this. I think it is a God given gift that we all have. But I do think that a lot of people lose it as life moves on because of how hard life can be, because how brutal it can be. But I'll speak for myself. There's been many times that I've lost my confidence, that I didn't feel worthy or I didn't feel like I belonged, or even now as I'm in this next chapter in my life trying to figure out what's next. You're like, "Oh, can I do that? I don't know. Should I do that?" I'm like, "No, no, no, no. Remember who you are. Remember that 18-year-old version of yourself that was in a new city, eyes wide open, willing to learn, willing to take it in, fearless." So it's there. I can attest to that. That version of me is still there. That 20-year-old who was just loving life and living it is it's always going to be there. I just know now in my 30s, I have to dig a little deeper to find him. I have to really work hard to get him out, to dig deep in myself and have him come out when I'm in an interview or I'm holding space. So if you're out there, know that that version of you is there. That version of you that you've always wanted to be is there. You just have to dig it out. And for me, what's truly helped me is remembering those times and remembering where I was at and why I felt that way. What was it that made me feel that way? Did I present myself differently? Did I listen to a certain type of music? Like I said, did I surround myself with a certain group of people? The answer to all of that was yes. Yes. And I think as we get older, we kind of lose that. But if you're listening out there and you are trying to figure that out, find yourself again, remember who you are. Remember that. But this is going to be a short episode. It was something that I really wanted to talk about because I've been in this portion in my life where I'm really trying to figure out what the next decade looks like for me. And I'll admit, it's scary. I think it's scary for a lot of people to figure out what the next chapter would look like. But what's helping me is remembering myself, remembering what makes me happy. So remember what makes you happy. What brings you joy? What brings you light in your life? What brings that sparkle in your eye? Because I think sometimes as life happens, we lose that sparkle. I think sometimes we're like, oh my God, I don't have that in me anymore. Where did that spark go? why can't I find it anymore? It's there. We got to look for it. I'm telling you, it is there. That sparkle will always be there. You just have to find it. So I want to thank you for tuning in to this short episode. I want to thank you for taking the time just to listen. And again, I'm going to say this one last time for all you listening. I know how it can be growing up in a space where we sometimes have to forget who we are. We sometimes have to brush that under the rug and not care about ourselves. Remember who you are. You are fearless, you are worthy, and you are able to conquer anything you want. Thank you for tuning in. I'll see you on the next episode.